Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a quick moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is your ultimate guide to understanding the do's, don'ts, and complexities of the higher ed social media ecosystem. Host Jenny Lee Fowler from MIT brings her expertise and passion for social media to the table. Each episode offers a deep dive into real-world examples, dissecting what worked, what didn't, and identifying valuable lessons along the way. You'll get the key insights and tips to help you elevate your own social media game. Make sure your social media efforts hit the mark every time. Subscribe to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or search for it wherever you love to listen to podcasts.
Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO and I have a confession to make. I am ridiculously jealous of the guests that I'm bringing on today. I absolutely love working in environmental graphics. I think it's just one of the coolest things that we do, in part because they're so visible and you can see your handiwork as you walk across your campus or walk in your city. And so when Adrienne King started posting about all the environmental graphic work that she's doing at Indiana University, I was like, okay, she has to come on the podcast and talk about this because it's one of my favorite things. And I just am so jealous of what she's getting to do there. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, a podcast that empowers higher ed marketers to bring innovation, creativity, and excellence to their work. I'm your host, Jamie Hunt. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher educational professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. I'm so thrilled to be here with my friend and former Ohio colleague. We were both at Ohio schools for a while a couple years ago. Adrienne King, who's the Associate Vice President of Marketing at Indiana University. Hey, Adrienne, how are you?
Hey, Jamie, thanks so much for having me on. And our careers go back even before Ohio, both WVU grads. So
Yes,
yeah, it's been fun to watch your career in parallel. It's been a great journey.
I'm going to be teaching at WVU this fall in the
Oh, awesome.
IMC program. So I'm super excited about that. So, Adrienne, tell us about your higher ed journey.
I think I was probably destined to work in higher ed. I was the daughter of a college professor. And so I tell folks I grew up in higher ed quite literally. When I was a little girl and my mother couldn't find a sitter, she would take my sister and I to her evening courses out at the community college, and we would sit in the back of her class and do our
Wow.
homework while she taught. And so I've grown up in this environment and just seen the way it changes lives. My mother used to say, "Your education is the only thing in this world you'll ever truly own," and
Yeah.
that has stuck with me. So I've always known I would work in higher education. I don't know that I knew exactly in what direction, but by the time I got through high school, I had clearly a passion for marketing, for graphic design. And so I went on and got a undergraduate degree in graphic design and then an undergraduate degree in public relations and advertising. And then knowing I would work in higher ed, I knew I was going to need a graduate degree. So I got a master's degree in marketing communications because I just was a glutton for punishment, I guess. I went on and got my doctorate degree in educational leadership. And that actually turned out to be probably one of the best investments I made in myself. I learned more about budgets and higher ed finance than I realized I needed, and certainly was a fast way to get the knowledge that I was going to need to be successful in various marketing roles.
I was just talking to someone who said that they hired somebody for a VP, um, a CMO role who didn't have a degree beyond a bachelor's degree. And they were talking about how the faculty were super worked up about that. Like, how can we have somebody at the cabinet level without at least a master's degree? And I know that's why I pursued my master's degree, because on my campus, it was very much the same. Like, you needed to have a master's degree to be respected. And I think that's a little bit sad. I think there's a few people like Brad Bolender, who's a freaking rock star, who has been very public about he's probably the last generation of folks that can get away with not having one. But it certainly seems like something you need to have today.
I think that we've probably seen that change a lot as the CMO role has moved into a cabinet level role.
Hmm.
And so, when it went from print shop to really being a strategic leader, there is an expectation that you have that credential. And so, yeah, I mean, my advice to folks coming in who want to work in higher education is you're going to need to do it. Ideally, find a job where you can take advantage of a tuition
Right.
reimbursement program and buckle down and get it done as early as you can in your career. It would be much harder, I think, to go back and do it at this point in mine.
Absolutely. I did mine. I started mine at my second higher ed job, finished it while I was at my third higher ed job. And from there, that's when I pivoted into CMO. And
Hmm.
there's no way that I could imagine being able to do it when I was at like the AVP type level, because you're already so busy, and then adding that to your plate is so difficult.
Yes, it would be nearly impossible. You're not sleeping already in this
No,
role, so you'd
right.
never sleep.
No, no. And then don't let's throw in kids and all of that into the mix as well. So
Yes.
you recently posted about all of the environmental graphics that you're doing at Indiana University. Can you tell me a little bit about like what you're doing with environmental graphics at the university?
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple different initiatives that are happening at IU. One is last fall, we launched the university's first ever fully comprehensive brand strategy for the university. And Indiana University is much bigger than I think people realize. I mean, we've got 9 campuses across the state of Indiana. And so this brand strategy that we launched in the fall encompasses all of those campuses. And so in each of those campuses, as you would expect, has its own unique campus culture and sense of community. And so the environmental graphics have enabled us to activate on that brand strategy in really unique and different ways for each of those campuses that create that sense of home for each of the
Mm,
campuses. The other major initiative that's happening at IU right now is the transition of what is now IUPUI, which is an institution in Indianapolis that is co-owned by Purdue University and Indiana University. Those two institutions are splitting, and so IUPUI will become IU Indianapolis in July. And so, in creating a new identity for this campus, that transition has been ongoing, and that's been a really environmental graphics have played a huge part in what we're trying to do in creating that new identity on that campus.
I feel like environmental graphics just can really create like a sense of place on a campus. It can create a sense of pride too. It's sort of this idea of when your institution looks beautiful and has a flavor to it, you feel a bigger sense of pride about the institution. But for you, as you're thinking about it in the context of your overall branding and marketing strategy, how do you see them fitting into that overall strategy?
I guess for us, it's really been about creating a sense of community for the campus. It's a great way to bring your brand strategy to life. You're essentially activating your own brand ambassadors in their home environment. Your faculty, staff, students, and alumni who are on campus, they love your brand, they're engaged with your brand. And so giving them something to relate to and reminding them that they're a part of this larger community, I think has been really important. I think if you look at environmental graphics as just an advertising opportunity, you're missing the point. Our focus has been about that sense of community here at IU.
Can you talk about a specific project where you have seen environmental graphics really transform a campus space into something that does kind of serve that brand purpose, that marketing goal and strategy?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, let's take our Indianapolis campus for example. In making that switch over to the new identity, that's obviously been really important. Probably more so for the campus community than even for the city of Indianapolis. It's been about letting our faculty, staff, and students know that you still belong here. You're still a part of this, and this is the next chapter for IU Indianapolis, and this is what it's going to look like. You know, we recently placed a large trident on the top of the campus center, lights up at night, and I've had faculty say it's like a beacon in the city, which has been a cool way to hear somebody describe it because it shines as a north light for the campus community that you're home. This is where you belong, and whether you're an alum that's working downtown in the city, you know, you can look out your window and you see this and you're like, oh, that's my alma mater. I recognize IU, and IU is an important part of my personal community.
I love the idea of using this environmental graphics to help also transform an institution that's going through. I mean, it's more than just a name change, right? Like the IUPUI, it's a massive change for the institution. Are you seeing the environmental graphics as being playing a role in building some pride in what the new institution is?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, anytime you have an identity change like that, you know, there's a sense of reckoning and mourning over what might feel like a loss of the history. We've really tried to embrace it as um, IUPUI has a rich history in the city of Indianapolis, and that's the foundation for what will be the next chapter in the book. And so the environmental graphics and the branding that we've done around IU Indianapolis has been about starting to create that sense of excitement as we start to embark on what will be the next chapter for IU Indianapolis, and it gives folks something to be excited about. They can see the future, gives them something to rally around together, and realize that it's still the same community of scholars and students that are engaging every day. And so I think it's been fun to watch them get excited and rally around it, even more so than what we anticipated. I mean, that's what we hoped for, but it's fun to walk campus and see them taking selfies with the new environmental graphics and seeing themselves up on the skywalks. And they're like, that student is in my class. And they can see themselves and their classmates in the environmentals. And that's been really fun to see them relate to that.
I always think that whenever I'm rolling out a new brand or a new visual identity, that environmental graphics are some of the biggest ways that you can show your campus what that brand is. Because, a lot of the print materials that you're creating are going to be going to prospective students, and a lot of the digital advertising, all of that kind of stuff is going primarily externally. But the environmental graphics are kind of creating that sort of um, vibe of the new brand on your campus and creating that sense of like, this is who we are. This is what we look like. This is what we feel like. This is our voice. This is our personality in ways that our campus community gets really excited about. Like when I was at Winston-Salem State, we had a big water tower on campus. I don't actually know what was in it. It might have just been empty, but it was like a big, like almost like a silo. And we painted the new mascot logo on the side of it, and people got really excited about that. And it's really, honestly, it's simple, right? Like,
Yep.
but it's it can have such a profound impact.
I can remember the first time I added pole banners on a campus. I was at Murray State in Kentucky, and you know, one of the challenges we had was during the summer, campus it just doesn't have the same vibe when students aren't there, right? And yet you've got prospective students who are coming to campus and they're trying to make a very important life choice about whether or not this is the right fit for them. And we did something as simple as putting up pole banners throughout campus and chose to focus on photos of our students, and it created a sense of life and energy for the campus tour during the summer when you otherwise would have been a relatively quiet campus. I got such positive feedback from students and parents who could walk through campus and they're like, I can feel what it would be like to be a student here. I get the sense of what September is going to be like. And so I think it is amazing the power that environmental graphics can have when they're done really well.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when we finally convinced our chancellor to let us hang big banners off the side of one of our biggest buildings. It was like a 3-story banner or something, and there was all this reluctance because we were going to have to put drill holes in the brick or whatever. And but then when we hung them up, people got so excited about them, and we saw people taking selfies with them in the background and stuff. And I was like, isn't that worth like drilling a few holes in the brick? Which kind of brings me to my next question is, when you're integrating all of these environmental graphics on your campus, one of the challenges that I've seen is like the cost, right? Like there's sometimes some resistance of like, this is just kind of extraneous effort. Why are we doing this? Why are we spending money on this? But what are some of the challenges that you faced when you're trying to have it be part of your strategy?
Part of it certainly is cost, but I also think there's something to be said for the same environmental graphics will not work on every campus. So, what worked on one campus is not necessarily going to translate to another campus. So, I think it's really important that you understand your campus and your campus culture. So, like at IU here in Bloomington, we're known for having a beautiful campus. Folks take a lot of pride in the look and feel of this campus and the spirit of this campus. And I think some of the environmental graphics that we've implemented in Indianapolis would not work on this campus.
Mm,
And they would not be received with the same sense of excitement and enthusiasm. And so I think you have to be really conscientious about the environment that you are working within and knowing your campus community. I always say the best way to go about a project like this is to walk the campus.
mm,
Look at where your campus community is already gathering. Where do the students naturally hang out? Where do you see faculty and students in a mentorship kind of environment? Is it in the library? Is it in the campus center? Because you want to take advantage of what is naturally happening. But I also think it helps you prioritize if resources are tight, where you're going to get the most bang for your buck in terms of, putting a banner on a building on the side of campus just because it happens to be the tallest building. If that's not where your campus community is going to congregate, then that maybe is not the best place to focus your limited resources.
Having worked in higher ed for a long time, have you seen a shift in environmental graphic usage on campus? I know I have, but I'm curious about your experience with that.
I think in general, folks are much more willing to consider it. I think if I look back to when I started my career in West Virginia, and I can't even imagine. I don't think we even had pole banners at the university I was at in West Virginia. And the idea, much to what you were saying earlier, the idea of drilling holes into the side of a building to put a banner up just would not have been well received. I think now there are enough institutions doing it that our campus facilities colleagues are seeing it done at other institutions, and they're seeing how it can be done really well, and that it can be an additive and not deter from the beautiful campus. And so I think when it's done with intentionality, it works really well. But I would say that's a shift that has probably happened even in just the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
I've seen more and more of it.
When I first started working in higher ed in 2004, which is like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Um, but when I first started working in higher ed, 2004, I remember we got to kind of say, these are the paint colors that people can use to paint their offices. And my boss had at the time, when I look back on it, a kind of revolutionary idea of taking this sort of white walled hallway and creating this like mural that was the timeline of the history of the college for one of its anniversaries. And it was super, super cool. But then the next one I went to, it was like, it was entirely a facilities thing. Like you said, no pole banners, no, like nothing. There was nothing. Even the signs on campus didn't really have institutional branding. And we weren't in the conversation at all. And that I've seen every institution I go to, it's like this evolution from like maybe you get to pick the colors people paint their offices to now where I am, the architect, we approve every environmental graphic. We work with her, hand in glove on what we're going to put, where we're going to put it. She does all of that legwork around like what are the high visibility areas, the high traffic areas, what are the materials needs for the area based on the traffic and all of that. And then, you know, we work with the signage company and all of that. But I think back to that second university I worked for, like I said, we weren't even the conversation. It was
Mm.
facilities just kind of picking what facilities liked. And that was pretty much it.
I think that, yeah, I mean, I can remember working at a university in West Virginia, and we were doing a renovation of like a campus student study center. And I remember getting a call from facilities, and they were like, "Hey, Adrienne, we're going to be doing this renovation, and there's a blank wall in there. Do you have any idea about artwork?" And that was the first time that I think on that campus we'd really been able to embrace environmental graphics, and we did a full wrap of the wall that was kind of mosaic and a collage in nature, and it was so well received, and it made for a beautiful backdrop for the ribbon cutting, and students loved hanging out there. And that was kind of the start of conversations about, oh, well, where else could we do this? And I think, when people started to see the impact of that, was not a real expensive project,
Hmm.
but the way it was so well received by the campus community, then my colleagues in facilities were willing to engage with us, because it didn't feel like it was forced. It was like, oh, we see the value in this. And I think that's really important. They've got to understand the impact of that work.
How do you recommend folks measure the impact of it?
We look at locations that are where large groups are going to congregate, where we're going to be able to see how many eyes are on it. We've done some kind of unique things with environmental graphics here at IU that are intentional about creating organic user generated content opportunities.
Hmm.
So, the perfect spot to take your selfie or to do your TikTok video. And so we can track all of that. But ultimately, for me, it is when I'm walking over to grab lunch and I see the group of prospective students out on their campus tour, and they're looking up and they're pointing at the environmental graphics, or they're walking across the skywalk with the wrap around it, and they see students that look like them and they can see
Hmm.
themselves there. It's those kind of moments that you're like, yes, this
Hmm.
worked. This was successful.
I think the selfies that you start to see on social media, and we did like a thing where you could see like this is what the old the building looked like 50 years ago versus today, like a sign that where if you stand at the right angle, it like
Oh,
intersects with the
cool.
current building, like that kind of thing. Alumni were so excited about that. Tons of like you're saying user generated content. You can do a lot of social listening, I think, around like whether they're hitting or having an impact. But I imagine if you work in facilities, being able to say, like, look at, I'm compiling a bunch of the selfies, a bunch of the pictures, the way people are excited about the work that you installed. You installed this work. Look at how much people love it. I mean, that's like a subtle way of saying, like, don't you want to do more work with me on this
Yeah.
type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I am probably most excited about commencement season this year because of all of the environmental graphics. And I know in my own mind, when we were plotting it out, I'm like, this will be the perfect spot to take your commencement photo. And this is going to be where students come with their families to take that family photo and have that memory here as kind of a lasting memory from IU. And so I'm hopeful that I will see all of those on social media. And, I might take you up on that idea, Jamie, of taking those photos and sending a quick thank you note to our facilities colleagues and saying, together we were able to create this memory for these students.
Anytime you can get facilities on your side, you're I mean, because there's so many things that we want to do that we need them, and I really want them to feel connected to the work that we do because I think that makes it much more exciting and interesting. It's not just like, "Oh, I'm doing this thing that Jamie wants me to do," rolling my eyes or whatever. It's like, "No, this is impacting recruitment, retention, student success." Even if it's in some small way, it's still really important work.
Yeah, having it tied back to the institution's mission. And I think it has to be a partnership. It can't be marketing dictating we want to do XYZ, and simultaneously marketing can't sit by the wayside and wait for facilities to come and say we have a blank wall. What do you
Right.
want to do with it? It really does have to be a partnership, and it's one you have to revisit on a regular basis and say, is this working? Do we want to make changes here, etc.
Yeah, yeah. So, can you talk through like how you go about conceptualizing an environmental graphic project?
I'm always on the lookout for inspiration. And like we talked about earlier, I think what works at one institution isn't necessarily going to replicate to another. And I also think quite honestly, higher ed's a little bit behind when it comes to environmental graphics and marketing. And so looking outside of the industry to see other things, particularly when I travel, I routinely take pictures of things and I'm like, there's got to be a way to adapt this. And sometimes I take pictures of really cool environmental graphics and without any idea of the institution I might implement it at. I have one on my phone that I think is so incredibly cool that I took of outside of an art museum in San Diego several years ago
Oh,
that I'm like, it's a three-dimensional environmental graphic that is so cool. And I've just been waiting for the right spot to create something like this, but it's always in the back of my mind of when I'm looking for an environmental graphic, how do we bring that to life? Does that make sense?
no, I totally know what you mean. Like, I take pictures of stuff kind of everywhere I go, also. And I also one time took a group of my designers, videographers. It was actually probably about a quarter of my team down to another university to kind of like, let's scope out what they're doing just to get, another set of ideas. What's another university doing that might help inspire us? So kind of once you've conceptualized out, like, this is the location, we've identified this as like this is a high traffic or a high visibility
Mhm.
location, and kind of this is what we want to do. Where do you go from there?
We really like to look at the use of the space. So that's why, I do think it needs to be a partnership. Usually, our marketing team or a group of our marketing team will walk the space with our facilities team, and the marketing team will go over a couple different times throughout the week, different times of the day to see how is the space being used.
Mm,
And then we give a lot of thought to what do we want the outcome or the sense of feeling to be in this particular space. So let me give you an example. At IU Indianapolis, we're going through this identity change. We've talked about that. And so we wanted to make sure that prospective students, when they come on campus, who are coming on campus during this transition period, can really see what the future is going to be like for them. And so we chose the visit space where our tours start in the campus center as a very intentional space, right? It's obvious they're going to all be gathering there anyway. And we sat down and the marketing team asked themselves, like, what are the objectives that we want our students to feel or experience here? What are we laying the groundwork with in terms of the campus tour? They actually walked and did the campus tour with our admissions team so that they could understand what, this is essentially the first stop in the brand experience. And then students and their families are going to go on a campus tour. So, what do we need that first stop to accomplish? What groundwork do we need to lay to make sure that the campus tour is successful for those students? And so ultimately, they came back and they said it's really important that students understand from the get go that IU Indianapolis is located in the heart of Indianapolis, and that
mm,
being in the city, the sense of momentum and excitement around Indianapolis is such an important part of a student's experience on that campus. So we wanted to find a way in the campus graphic and the environmental graphics in that room to give them a preview of what they were going to experience when they go out and tour campus and they're walking along a campus that is in the heart of a city and they are hearing the sounds of the city and that hustle and bustle that comes from being in an urban location. And so I think really sitting down and asking yourself, what do you want stakeholders to experience here? And thinking about it goes back to that idea that environmental graphics really are not just flat brand or flat ad space. It
hmm.
really is about the brand experience and what do you want constituents to feel or think or experience in that space, and then designing your marketing around that.
Do you use internal talent to do that design, or do you outsource that? How do you actually do the design work once you figured out what you want?
So at Indiana University, we're really lucky. I've got an incredibly talented creative team here. And so we have done all of the actual design work in house. We obviously partner with vendors to do the creation and
Right.
install. But yeah, I mean, the creative team, they take a lot of pride in that. And I mean, is there anything cooler than seeing your work up, 100 feet in the air? What a cool thing to put in your portfolio. So they really enjoy that, and a lot of my creative team are IU grads. And so yeah, I think there's a little bit of competitiveness. Sometimes we'll toss it out and we'll say to the design team, hey, we've got this space, I'm going to break you into two different groups and figure out which, you're each going to pitch pitch your ideas. And so they'll come up with ideas and bring it back. And there's a little bit of a competitiveness there about whose graphics are going to ultimately be able to come to fruition. And that's been cool to watch.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times bestselling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
I think environmental graphic design is really a discipline. Like it's not just it's understanding space. It's understanding a three-dimensional space and storytelling in a three-dimensional context. And I was so lucky when I was at Miami. Michael Mattingly was our art director. He's retired. He's was absolutely phenomenal at it. But he actually worked with writers as well, like content strategists on some of his projects, because it was like, how do we bring storytelling into a space? I can't remember the name of the space, but it was like a room that was used for members of the Miami tribe of Oklahoma, as like a gathering space. And so we
Mm.
were creating like these environmental graphics around that. And he worked really closely with content strategists on how do we tell the story of the Miami tribe, their experience, here at Miami University, their experience through history, through environmental graphics. And I just loved that it wasn't just like, let's just make it pretty. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, no, it's a really unique form of storytelling, I think. And sometimes it's three-dimensional and sometimes it's digital, but yeah, it can be a really unique form of storytelling, I think.
Yeah. There's one project I really wanted to do here that's not exactly environmental graphics, but kind of similar, but where students would be able to program the lights on the fountains to be able to change colors. Like there would be like a QR codes they could scan to be able to do some small amount of programming to be able to change the lights on the fountains, the colors. And I just thought like it's so cool to create an interactive environmental graphic, and I wasn't able to do it. Have you been able to do any sort of interactive ones yet?
I can't say that I have. I mean, we created something in Toledo, and a lot of universities have done this where the lights are programmable, but so that if the football team wins or the choir wins a performance, they can change the lights like on the front of the university hall. But I've never done anything where students have the ability to do that. I mean, I think that would be so cool. What a fun way to be able to engage. It kind of takes me back. I did my undergrad at Marietta College. They're known for this large rock that's probably a very small pebble, but it's been painted so many thousands of times. Um, but that it was that same kind of idea of like probably more guerrilla style environmental graphics that's been going on for years, but where students could go and you can spray paint the rock and change out that graphic. And so finding a way to do that with technology could be really cool. And I'm really interested right now in lighting and sound and environmental graphics and trying to figure out how do we work those into things, because I think it's very unexpected.
I've never been able to work with sound in environmental graphics. That sounds absolutely fascinating.
I have been to a couple of places where sound has been worked into environmental graphics. I was at a museum one time where you could go there and you can scan a QR code and it will play. It will give you, like, I've thought to myself, you could translate this into higher education where you go to different locations on campus, you can scan a QR code and it might play the fight song if you're standing outside of the football stadium, or where you can kind of get your own tour, or if you're an alum, you can go back and reminisce on the sights and sounds of what campus looks like. I've always thought this would be so cool to implement around like a centennial
Yeah.
celebration or something along those those lines. I've never been in a position to be able to get it implemented.
That would be amazing. I just think about, like, Disney World pipes in, like, the cricket sounds and stuff when you're
Yes.
it's all fake, and I don't know if you did you ever watch the show Wayward Pines?
No, I
Oh,
haven't.
it's so good for starters, at least the first season is, but I don't wanna give it away, but, like, I think it's the first episode, he discovers that, like, all the cricket noises, all this thing is all just piped into this town, and I always think about that, like, when I think about how you could have I feel like you could have a better sense of safety on campus, to be honest with you, if you were piping in cricket sounds that kinda overrode the traffic noises. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're in the country, you're not, in the hustle and bustle of a city at night or something.
I just think
I
I
don't
go
know.
back to like that the shift we were talking about earlier with the pole banners and the idea
Mhm.
of being able to create to replicate that sense of life and energy that happens on a college campus, even if it's the middle of July. I think there would be a way to do that with sound of giving folks that experience of the cheering that comes from the stadium during a game
Yeah.
or the band playing. I mean, those sounds are such a part of the college experience. I always say you know you work on a college campus when you can hear the marching band practice. I just think being able to find a way to replicate some of those things that are really kind of unique in higher ed would be such a fun way. So if you have listeners who have done that, please look me up. Let's have a conversation because I'd love to
Yes.
figure out how you've been able to implement this.
That would be so cool. That would be so cool. My office is right next to the stadium, so the marching band practices, and so it's like every afternoon at like 4 o'clock, I start to hear the marching band, and you're totally where else can you work or live
It,
where you're
it's
hearing that every day?
it would be so cool. So I need to know if there is a CMO out there that has been able to do this. We need to jump on a call because I
Yes.
am inspired and I want to make this happen.
I y please also call me. If somebody calls you, let's do a three-way call on
All
this.
right, sounds good.
So, on many of our campuses, like, sustainability is just a high priority, and environmental graphics, I think, can play a role in that, but there's also, I think, probably some sustainability concerns around environmental graphics, and has that played into your approach at all?
I would say that we really try to focus on durability and longevity in the materials that we use for environmental graphics. And that really differs depending on where your campus is. I worked at a college out in Idaho for a while, and many of the things we've talked about here, pole banners and other things, would never have survived in that
Really?
environment. And so, if you did them, you had to go into it with the mindset that you were going to be replacing those pole banners
Mhm.
every year after the harsh winters out there.
Mhm.
And it's more than sustainability. I mean, that's a massive investment. And so
Mhm.
I think, you've got it. That's where leaning into your colleagues and facilities and campus planning can play a huge role in what will work and what will not, and what can you afford to do because you've got to budget it up front if you're going to have to be replacing these things all the time, and then that really does become a sustainability factor. Do we want to be ripping this banner off the side of the building and replacing it every 6 months, or might there be a better place and way to implement these environmental graphics on our campus?
I am a big believer in buy cheap, buy twice. Like, if you kinda scrimp out on the printing, and it will fade faster, and you're just gonna have to replace it that much more quickly. So if especially if you have I know your campus has red as one of its
Hmm.
colors, and I was at if for 12 years or something, I've been at campuses that have had red, and those will fade to pink, like, so fast if you get them printed cheaply, and it does not look good. I think red is just about the most difficult color to kinda keep looking fresh, and so spend a little bit more. If the printer's like, "This will increase durability," or it's UV protectant or whatever, do that because 'cause you're not gonna wanna replace these every couple years.
100%. And there are some things like with outdoor billboards. The reality is they're going to fade, and so we go into it intentionally designing that with a white background rather than crimson as the bulb, because as soon as it starts to fade and it looks terrible, I don't want it up there at all. And so I do think that's where knowing the environment and certainly your designers and your production team are going to know some of those things. But yeah, you're right. I think making the investments, spend a little more for high quality products, take the time to put the UV coating on there, even if it adds an extra 3 days to production
Right.
schedule, because ideally these environmental graphics are going to have a reasonable lifespan on your campus, and they're not something that you're replacing on a regular basis.
Yeah. Have you done much in the way of things like bus wraps?
We have done bus wraps in Indianapolis, especially because our students do use the buses to get around town and to get downtown to their co-ops and those kinds of things. And so we are in the process of wrapping the fleet of buses in Indianapolis right now.
That's awesome. And that's another thing where it's like spend a little bit more on those because they can have a long shelf life.
Yes.
Like the materials have gotten so sturdy that you can have them last for 5, 6, 7 years, but definitely invest because it's expensive to wrap a bus.
Yeah, and they're essentially a billboard on wheels, and you
Mhm.
don't want it to look like it's in poor quality rolling all over the city.
Yeah, yeah. I have found, like, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but here we go. I found that with bus wraps, I'm finding that a lot of people are like, I had my intern design the bus wrap because that seemed like a fun, cool project. And we're having to do a lot of education about it being a rolling billboard for the university and that we can't just put something that's not within brand standards on a bus. Like it's like this broken thing in people's brains that they think like, "Oh, it's a bus. We'll just have fun and put whatever we want on it." And have you run into that at all?
I am happy to say I cannot relate to you on that one.
Good. Oh, that if anybody's cracked that nut, like that's I mean, we're always like, "Oh, that's lovely," but we really have some brand standards and kind of lean into like we work with the architect on all our environmental graphics and this falls into that, but that I've I have seen that so much here.
I would
Um,
think just the investment alone,
right.
of something that expensive, they would feel the need to engage the professionals on campus, and that's one of those situations where from the marketing side, you're like, "No, please let us help you with this.
Yes.
We'd love to partner with you on this. That's a great idea. Let's work together on it."
Yeah, we promise you'll love it. Yeah, yeah. Are there any things that you see, in terms of trends or innovations on the horizon that get you really excited about in terms of environmental graphics?
I think right now the things that have been on my mind recently have really been around light and sound, because I do feel like most institutions they've done the wraps, and whether it's on a bus or the outside of a building, we've all probably done a banner that's hanging on the side of a building, and
Mhm.
certainly pole banners and those kinds of things. But I think looking at ways to utilize light and sound as part of the brand experience, and maybe it's because right now my mind set has really been about, we've got this new national brand strategy at IU, and how can we activate that. And for me, it really becomes part of the experience I want alumni and students and faculty to have when they're associating with the brand. And so I'm thinking about that in all different ways, not just what they're seeing, but what are they hearing, what are they experiencing. That I loved the faculty member who said to me, I love the new lighted tridents on the campus center. It's like a beacon. I love that, that idea that they are seeing that as a reminder of the brand. And it's more than just the logo. It's part of the experience. And so I am looking at light and sound, and how we might be able to use that in environmental signage. We haven't done a whole lot with that yet, but a simple thing that we did was we worked with a graduate of our Heron School here in Indianapolis, and she's an amazing artist. And lots of institutions have the three-dimensional logos, but we really
Mhm.
wanted to lean into utilizing our own talent. So we approached her. She's a small business owner, and we said, "Hey, we have this idea. We want to put a trident in the Indianapolis airport where it's a perfect, user generated social media selfie spot. Can you work with us to create this? And so, she created this beautiful statue that does light up in the Indianapolis airport. And I flew back last weekend right before the eclipse here, and it was like 11:30 at night. And I'm telling you, coming through security and seeing this beautifully lit up trident, all the other environmental graphics, all the other posters and signs that your local airport sells, you don't notice any of those. You see that lit up trident, and it is like, I am home. I'm home. And I love that, the power of that. And so I think we've got to find more ways to look at light and sound, and how do we implement those across our environmental marketing.
I love that you found a way to stand out in an airport because, like, everybody, you walk down those long concourses or whatever, and it's all university and hospital ads for starters. So
Uh
it's like
huh.
that's it, and maybe like a couple companies mixed in there, and we all look the same. You're walking down the hall, and you almost have to buy those just because everybody else in your
Oh, a
market has
hundred
bought
percent.
them. Like
It's
I don't.
self-defense marketing is what I call
Yes.
it.
Yeah. But now you, like, created this new thing that probably all the other schools in your market are like, "Dang it, Adrienne."
And I will say, we came up with the idea, and then we were very intentional about making sure that there was a non-compete clause, to
Nice.
make sure no one else is going to do something very similar, at least in our airport. But yeah, I mean, you've got to look at ways to do things that are unexpected or different. And my president felt very strongly that we needed to advertise in the airport because all other universities are in the airport.
Mhm.
And we did. We bought some basic advertising while we were racking our brains about, well, what could we do differently that would stand out? But installing that trident, and then being able to utilize a local alumna who, could give it its own story, that has been so fun. And I have seen thousands of family portraits and
Wow.
selfies on social media. It has been amazing the way people have engaged with this. We recently had the Kelly directed midday with all these prospective students coming in. That weekend, we saw all of these selfies of families coming in. They're so excited to be on campus and be accepting their admission, and then they're flying home. And of course, they're going to take a picture with the trident. I mean, why wouldn't you?
Right, of
Everybody wants to
course.
take a picture with the trident.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm for one, I'm glad I don't work in the same market as you. It would be tough to compete because that was such a smart idea. And the storytelling aspect of it, that's something that just adds that extra layer to it. And I, I'm I mean, all of good marketing is good storytelling. So having this environmental graphic that has a story attached to it is just elevates it to the next level. And I bet all your counterparts in Indianapolis hate you.
Well, I don't know that it's my counterparts. It's the counterparts of my team. I have to say, Jamie, like, I mean, the Airport Trident was a great idea of our media buyer, and we were able to partner with alumni relations and others to find those people. It is 100% about having a really great team.
Yes.
And then, quite frankly, challenging them to come back with something completely unexpected and saying, surprise me,
Yeah.
bring me the idea of Times Square, bring me the idea of, doing something like the trident in the airport. Let's think outside of the box. Now, some of the ideas, I'm like, well, let's think that through. That may not be one we're going to activate on quite yet, but having a really talented team, and then empowering them and giving them the freedom to just go out and dream big. I am so blessed with the talent here at IU.
But I totally hear what you're saying, and I'm absolutely the same of saying, like, my team is the rock stars. They make me look good, but you have to empower them in order for them to feel comfortable bringing creative ideas to you. Because if you were shooting down their ideas, if you were like saying you're not, I actually had a boss once that said, "I don't pay you to have ideas." If you were, that kind of
Oh my.
leader, you're not going to bring ideas to the table. So you definitely have some credit there for that.
Well, thank you.
So, are there any other advice that you would give to someone who's like, you know what, I haven't played in environmental graphics yet, or I've only dabbled in it, but I want to do a lot more in the next fiscal year or whatever? What recommendations or advice would you have?
If you're going to do it, go big or go home. Environmental graphics are not the place to be humble. it is about leaning in and being really bold. And for us at IU, that's been really easy because it leans into our brand value of confidence and optimism. And you have to be willing to do that. I've been in higher ed marketing for almost 20 years. I can honestly tell you, Jamie, I never thought I'd see a day that I would be designing an ad for Times Square for a university. And, last fall when we rolled out the brand strategy, we put up a digital ad that was 200 feet tall. And if that
Wow.
doesn't speak to go big or go home, I can't think of what does. You got to have the confidence to just go for it. You
Hmm.
got to make sure you have the leadership support to be able to embrace it. I'm blessed here to have great leaders who support even our craziest ideas. and and thankfully they've worked out really well. But you've got to be willing to be bold, and you've got to be willing to, you need to think about what is unexpected. Because if you can lean into the things that are unexpected, that makes it really memorable. And that's what I think makes for success in environmental graphics is, how can you do something that people are going to talk about after the fact, even when they've walked away from that graphic? Because it's either got a great story to it, or it was in a really unusual location, or it was just done so different than anything they've ever seen. So so be bold and don't be afraid to look at unexpected opportunities.
I think that's fantastic advice. And for those of you at institutions that are running on a shoestring budget, because I know that there's a lot of folks that listen with that, honestly, I've found that alumni or donors are often willing to make donations to support environmental graphics, much more so than any other type of marketing. Like, I think you could probably get a donor to support some sort of airport play like Adrienne's talking about, or something in your city. We leased out a building when I was at Miami in downtown Cincinnati, and working with a donor to help support doing just wrapping all the windows and making it have this big sense of Miami University having a presence in downtown Cincinnati, which was about an hour from campus. Finding those big plays are the kinds of things that donors do get excited about, and they can say, like, "I'm responsible for this super cool thing." So maybe if you can save your money, your budget for the things that donors don't get as excited about, and see if you can work with advancement to find opportunities that they do get excited about.
And I would add on to that, Jamie, we've got some things in the works that are pretty exciting about related to our July 1 transition over to IU Indianapolis. And while I'm not willing to let them all out of the bag, I will tell you that many of them, I would put them in the realm of guerrilla environmental marketing. They're very unexpected. And I will tell you, they cost $0. And so really leaning into who are your community partners that you might be able to partner with around something. Don't always assume, like, I mean, I'll admit, I initially kind of poo-pooed the Times Square idea when the team brought the idea to me, because I was like, there is no way we can afford this. Well, to be fair, we only bought it for a 24-hour period, but
Mhm.
digital advertising is your friend. You can buy it for select
Mhm.
periods of time. When we knew we had a large alumni event going on in New York City, we knew we had a prospective student event going on in New York City. So don't necessarily assume that just because you're on a tight budget that it is outside of your budget. If you can get creative, maybe there's a campus partner, maybe there's a donor. There might be ways you could do some of these things where it is literally only the cost of production. We just did we had the eclipse come through Indiana. 5 of our 9 campuses were in the line of totality. And some of our art students had created some beautiful posters that were inspired by pop music and the eclipse. And so we partnered with Visit Indy to have those blown up in huge sizes to put on the sides of buildings. And thanks to that partnership, we literally just paid for the cost of production. And what a great opportunity for those students. So there are some ways to do things on a shoestring budget if you can think outside of the box.
I wanna plus one your working with your tourism office, 'cause we did that at Winston-Salem State, and they gave us, I wanna say it was a grant for, it's this is a number of years ago, but I wanna say it was like a $100,000 grant or something for creating environmental graphics around our homecoming. So putting like pole banners up on the city, like leading like the parade route and all of that. And we didn't end up then having to pay for any of that, but they really wanted to kind of dress up the city and have it look like welcoming to the alumni coming back. I think we did like some billboards around town. Like they were really, really supportive because they wanted to show that they supported their local college and they saw us as a cultural resource for the city. So +1 on working with your visitors bureau.
Well, thank you, and I'm taking notes. We've got homecoming coming up in the fall too, so
Yeah.
I will be reaching out to some campus partners. Thank you, Jamie.
I love that. I love that. Well, and I think like we could probably have had a whole episode around the eclipse. My mom drove 11 hours each way to Indianapolis for the eclipse and thought it was absolutely amazing and was so impressed with everything Indianapolis did to just like make it an experience for people. So we probably need to have a whole side conversation about that. But that sounds amazing. I love that you were able to leverage those relationships to get your name out there sort of along that path of totality.
Yep. You got to look for where you're going to have
Mhm.
large groups of people that you can have an impact and showcase the great work of our faculty, staff, and students. That's what we do
Yeah,
as marketing professionals.
I love that. I love that. Well, Adrienne, if people have questions or they want to talk to you about how they've used sound in their environmental graphics, where can they find you?
The best way is on LinkedIn, Dr. A.D. King. It's DRAD King on LinkedIn. Love to have a virtual coffee, share all the ideas.
As always, listeners, you can also find me on LinkedIn, Jamie Hunt, JAIMEHUNT. I'm also on TikTok a little bit at the Higher Ed CMO. And I would love to connect with you and hear about what you're doing with environmental graphics and answer any questions that you might have about some of the stuff that I've done. And I hope you'll connect with Adrienne. And honestly, if you've done anything with sound, please connect to both of us because I want to hear more about that. As always, let's go bust some silos. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your host. Learn from Mallory Wilsey, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.